Good day, guys, Austin, and in this one today we're going to be setting up our arcade controls. Now, to be more specific, what we're going to be using today is the Xin-Mo board, or the Xin-Mo, wherever you pronounce this board. This is what we're going to be setting up today. Now, this is the cheapest, probably the most versatile, and the most simplest way of setting up your arcade controls. There is loads of different versions, and we'll probably go into that in just a second. However, this one is compatible with Windows PCs and Raspberry Pis, always depending on what kind of operating system you've got, but as long as you've got the norm, then you should be good to go with this. It's more or less plug and play, and that's why I'm showing you guys this first. There is loads of different ones out there, different kind of specifications, and more importantly, the different types of how they work. Now, this one is a controller based interface. In other words, what this does is translate whatever you've got on your arcade cabinet in terms of your controls, or your control setup itself. Maybe you've just got a standalone controller that you want to plug into your PC, your Raspberry Pi, or your TV, whatever it is. Maybe you've just got, I don't know, anything. Basically, if it runs arcade controls, this can do it. And like I said, this runs from a controller standpoint. So this imitates all your buttons, all your joysticks and stuff, whatever you've got on your control panel, into a control pad based command. So up on there would be up on a joypad. I don't know, one of the buttons would be X on a PS3 pad or something like that. That's the way that one works. Other ones out there work on a keyboard based command. In other words, when you press up on your joystick on your control panel, it would imitate you pressing a key on your keyboard. Obviously, different ones have got benefits, other ones have got problems or issues which arise. I'm not saying this one is perfect, but I'm saying this one is a great starting point for you guys. Now, in the control setup today that I'm using, I'm going to be using the Xin-Mo board like I explained. Included in there, you usually get a wiring loom, the board itself, and the USB interface. These usually come up to about 20 bucks, depending on what country you come from and depending on where you get them from. They're pretty much standard across the board. However, I cannot guarantee what kind of setup you guys are going to be like. It's more or less down to the supplier themselves. I'm going to put a link where I bought this one from. However, for the purposes of today's tutorial, I bought a whole pack because I'm going to be setting this up on a future arcade cabinet. So I got the interface itself, I got all the bits that normally come with it, the loom, the USB stuff, and I got, I think it's 20 or 22 buttons, some feature buttons, 2 zippy sticks, and it's all pretty much generic, what you would get in this kind of bundle. And again, I'll put a link to the one that I bought online, so you can get virtually the same. But trust me guys, you can get these on Amazon, you can get these on eBay, you can get them from absolutely anywhere, and they're pretty much generic. I cannot guarantee what kind of standards you will receive, but usually you will get the HAP style buttons, the zippy style or the Sandwar style joysticks, and any other features that they put in there. So that's the one that we're going to be setting up today. So now I've introduced you to what we're doing, let's get stuck in. Right, so the first thing you need to do is get whatever layout you are working on. So in this one, I'm using an offcut of control panel. As you can see, I've got a full 2-player control panel going on here, and I've already placed all the buttons and mechanisms in place. Now, this isn't exactly rocket science, but I'll quickly guide you through. For the buttons themselves, you cannot put them in while you've got the micro switch on there. So take the macro switch off if they're already on there, undo the collar, whack it through the actual hole, put the collar on, and that's it. All done. Now you need the micro switch actually in place. So again, we're looking at the little switch itself that's on the side, and you want to be placing that down into the switch so it can, when it's pressed, it presses on the actual button. So the way we put these in is there's little tiny notches on the side, and these line up with the holes which are placed onto the side of the micro switch. You want obviously the contacts to be on top, so it's just a case of lining up the holes with the little things on the side. Now the easiest way is to do this at the lowest part first, put it into the hole, put it in there, and that's it. Pretty damn easy. Now, as you can see on this side, what I've done is I've placed them all in the correct directions. So don't get me wrong, there is no correct directions, but they're all in the same direction, more or less angling to wherever your Xin-Mo pad is going to be located. So I'm not going to put this anywhere yet. I'm just going to leave it loose because I've not put this into my cabinet yet, so I'm not going to be putting this down. However, what I want to be doing is kind of aiming these into the middle on either side so that the wires have got, well, less ground to travel, because last thing you want to do is put this in and then find out that you've not got enough wires to actually connect it on there. So just to keep everything tidy, and that is the golden rule on this, guys, keeping everything tidy. Put everything pointing into the middle. Obviously on your micro switches on your control pad there's nothing you can do, but I'll show you how to address that in just a second. Right then, this is how we get it set up then. The first thing you want is your wiring loom. So this is going to be connecting all your buttons to these micro switches. Now again, this looks kind of daunting because there's not much going on here. There's no information, and well, there's a lot of wires and a lot of connections that we're going to be looking at. However, I've made your life easier and I've provided for you a SWAT guide. So in the description down below you'll see a link to a media file. All you need to do is print this out and you'll be greeted with this. Now here is the entire layout of the Xin-Mo board. So as you can see, it's orientated like that. USB connector at the bottom, and there is the pins all the way down the side. So these pins are for these side here, and these pins are for this side here. I've also given you the layout of a PS3 pad. So for those of you who haven't been on planet Earth for the last 20 years, you should know what buttons there were on a PlayStation orientated pad. Right then, as you can see, next to each pin, I've actually labelled what this is in terms of setup. Now for most emulators and stuff, it doesn't matter where you put the pins, because you can, I don't know, when you're configuring your joysticks and controls and things like that, it more or less works in a generic way anyway. You know, you can put any command into any position. That's the joy of using emulators. However, if you're using a PC based game or a Linux based game or something like that where you cannot configure the controls, then obviously it's just going to use the actual, as if you had a PS3 pad put in there. So if you've messed around with the controls at this point, then it could affect the way it's actually run, or running them games, should I say. So point to note on that one. However, let's actually show you how to do this. Now, as you can see on the side here, on the pins I've put little bars. Some of them have got 4, some of them have got 2, and some of them have got 1, and they seem to group over certain parts of the pins. Now as you can line up the pins and see what goes where, you can kind of figure out where the bar should be. Now what these bars correlate to is on your wiring loom. Let's take off the elastic so we can see. On the wiring loom you should have, so on one side you should have a group of connectors like this. They should all come in like 2s and 4s and 1s, and on the other side you should have a big heap of crimpers. These are the parts that's going to be attached to the actual buttons themselves, and these are the parts that's going to be attached to the actual Xin-Mo board itself. Now these blocks correlate to the blocks that I've put on this pad. Now don't get me wrong, normally when you buy this kind of setup you usually get a little diagram with it. However, either this is illegible, they're all wrong in the controls, they don't tell you about the blocks, or there's something missing. So I've made sure that everybody knows what they're doing with this, and I've supplied it for you, because, well, I've never got one that's actually right. Anyway, first thing we need to do then is we're going to be starting with our blocks of 4. So first block of 4, grab it off. And what you want to do is find your first block of 4 on your pad. You can start anywhere you want, but you want to keep this as logical as possible. Also, as we're going to start going through this, another handy hint to have is a block of zip ties, should I say. Doesn't matter what colour they are. In fact, it's pretty handy to have them different colours, I suppose, for different buttons. All these zip ties do is keep everything tidy, and that is, again, the golden rule for this, guys. You want everything to be as clean and tidy as possible, because once all these wires start going wide up, although it looks like a mess, it all is pretty logical. And to be honest, it's pretty easy. You just follow my system. Alright, first thing then, grab your group of 4. Put it into the top left hand side, and we're going to be focusing on player 1. So I'm going for that block there, which I've just put onto the board itself, as you can see in the top left hand corner. Now what I need to do is start wiring up these buttons. Now at this point, you need to figure out what button you want to have as what, because obviously we're working off a control pad here, and the layout of the buttons on the control panel is completely different. So you want to think about this in a logical way. Normally, if you're using PC games or a layout where you cannot change anything, what will normally happen is X button on an emulated game or a PC game will normally be the most used button. So on a control panel, the most used button would be, turning it over, this one, the most logical one closest to the control panel. So when you start wiring it up, think about logically which buttons you want to go where. Now a good idea again at this point would be to use a pen and just mark off these buttons on the rear side so you don't get mixed up, because obviously this is now a mirror image of what is on the other side. Another point to make is when we start getting to the controls itself, in other words the joystick, as you can see when I do it this way, when I click right on the pad, the actual mechanism that starts firing off, or the micro switch, is the one on this side, which is the left hand side. So it's a mirror image as the pole triggers the micro switch. There you go, you can just about see that, can't you? And same on the other side, it's the one on the other side. And just like magic, if you go up and down, the exact same thing starts to happen also. Hopefully that starts to make sense as you start wiring this up. Because all my buttons are white, there's no way of figuring out what it is without using a bit of common sense. So a good idea is to mark everything off on the other side as to where things are going. Right, back on track, we've got our thing wired up. Now what we want to do is start wiring the actual buttons itself. So I want to think that the button for X, chase it up on here, and this is the row that we just put in there. X is the second one down from the top, so I want to put that one on in first because, well, that's the most important one for me. So what I want to do is take the crimp side that corresponds to that second one down, and there's a contact on the top of the micro switch and there's a contact on the front. Where we want to start putting these is on the front. So it's a simple case of pulling back the plastic sheath and just whacking them on. There we go. And then put your sheave over it so nothing can now contact that by accident, and that's now pretty solidly in place. Nothing really is going to start moving that. Now it's a case of doing the exact same thing with all the buttons and the layout that you want to have, and it's just a case of going all the way around all of your controls, figuring out which button you want where, and oh, that's it really. So right, quickly do these. So now we've got our 4 buttons laid out on our control pad to our 4 main buttons on our control panel. And yeah, easy as that. Now what we need to do is start doing the exact same thing for all the rest of the buttons that we want on there. Now, as you can imagine, this is the main control panel. So what I want to do is put everything that is probably the most useful buttons from a control pad onto this region here. You may have more buttons on there, you may have less. I've got no idea what your setup is. Everybody's control panel is completely different. Right then, so what I'm going to probably do now is the left bumper and right bumper. So next one, as you can see, is another block of 4. So what I need to do now is grab the next block of 4. As you can see, that's going to go in the next pins vertically underneath it. So on my Xin-Mo board, I'm going to put the block of 4 to correspond with the diagram. And then again, it's just a case of marrying up the 2 buttons that I want to be using, probably with the left bumper and right button, because they're the ones normally used the most in PC games. Right, so the top one is the left bumper, so I'll probably make that the one at the top. So there you go, guys. That is now all my main controls for player 1 all set up on my Xin-Mo board. Now, I've used 2 foot blocks of 4 and I've wired up 6 buttons, which means that I've got 2 wires left. Now if I had another 2 buttons, obviously I could probably wire up my triggers to be controlling these 2 buttons here. However, I've not. So what I could do is probably use these as extra functional buttons. So you may have buttons somewhere else on the cab that could come in useful. Say for example the flippers on the side would be an awesome thing for this, because that would mean that player 1 triggers would be the flippers on the side of the cab. It depends on what kind of cab and whatever setup you're going for. If you're not using them, I would tie these up and put them out the way so they don't catch you in anything, they're not going to start triggering anything, and it keeps everything tidy. Again guys, the cardinal rule for all this is tidiness, which brings me up to the next stage. Now we've got all these buttons in place, what I want to do is start tidying this up. So easiest way to do that is the trusty zip ties that we were talking about before. You can also use obviously sellotape or any kind of tie that you got going on there. Bits of string, pure willpower, anything you want to use at this stage, it's all down to you. It's all personal preference. But I'm going to use a zip tie at this stage. Now, cut the bits off if you are using a zip tie, because, well, it doesn't look very good, does it, at the end of it? There we go guys, and that is the buttons now wired up on that control panel. Player 1 buttons done. Now what we need to do then is focus on our up, down, left and right. Now as you can see from a control pad, we have only got one interface to go up, down, left and right, and in our Xin-Mo board we've also only got one place to go up, down, left and right. So what we want to start doing is think logically about this. So we've got a block of 4 first off. Let's grab our block of 4. Here we go, next block of 4. And we're going to put this into start, select, right. So what we need to do now is put the extra buttons on there. So we're going to grab our block of 4. We're now going to place it onto the actual pad. Xin-Mo board, should I say. And as you can see, we're now starting to fill up player 1. Now, as you can see from the diagram, what we've got here is start and select. So the 2 buttons as of yet, we're not going to be concentrating on. We want to focus first off on the actual control board. Grab these, bring them round. And we're going to be focusing on right and left. So remember, we're going the opposite way round here now. So when I was to press right on the control panel, that is right on here. So I want my right one first, which is the one from the top. And this is the mechanism or the micro switch which is going to be triggered when I do this. You can see through normally which one is going. It's just a case of trial and error, but if you can see through the actual control mechanism, you can see which one is firing off. And in this case, it's this. So I'm going to put this connector onto the side, sheath it up, keep it clean, all good. And then it's just a case of going through all the same process all the way around here until you've got the entire thing all, well, done, to be honest, at the end of the day. And then once you've got that done, then again use your zip ties, keep it all tidy, so you've got one main stream going for your controls. Then what you'll have is one main stream going for your actual directional pad, and then it's a case of doing the exact same stuff on the other side for player 2. Now, once you've got all that in place, everything is tidy and as tidy as it can be. Now it's the second phase. Everything is now wired up. You've now got your Xin-Mo pad wired up to your start button, wherever your start button wants to be on your control cabinet, whatever your controls are here, whatever your coin button, so on and so forth. It's all up to you. Everybody's is completely different. Now, what you need to do is ground everything. So everything now is in its place. Everything is now wired up to where it should be. What you want to be focusing on is the ground wire. Now, included in your pack of wires should be one similar to this, which looks like a big massive jumbled mess with a daisy chain set of crimps. Now on one side of it you should find one of those black connectors with just one connector inside of it, and as you can see on our board we've got a ground wire with just one on there. So what I want to do is I want to put that black thing into there. Now of course I'm saving time here guys, otherwise there'll be like a 2-hour video while I connect all this up. But what we want to do is plug it into that bottom left pin, and there we go. And now it's a case of putting ground to all the buttons that we've got on our control board. Now, like we talked about, some will have 3 and some will have 2 connectors. However, the top one on the side will always be the micro switch for the actual command, and the top one on all of these micro switches, as in the one that's on the actual top of the micro switch where it's plugged in, that's your ground. So now it's a case of daisy chaining, logically thinking about where your Xin-Mo board will be located in your cabinet. It's a case of daisy chaining all the way around all of these micro switches. Now it doesn't matter what order you put them in, it doesn't matter if you skip one, as long as every one that you want to use has got a ground on it, because every micro switch needs a command wire and it needs a ground wire. So logically you just work from one switch to the next one all the way along, because you've only got so much wire in between each one of these connections. So it's a case of going round, plugging each one into the next connector all the way around until, well, you've got no switches left. Now you don't need to go back to the beginning, there's no need to make a full circuit on this one, it's just a case of making sure each one has been connected. Remember, keep these as tidy as possible as well guys, I can't stress that enough, keeping this tidy is paramount. Otherwise it ends up with a big jumbled mess, and once you have got it wired you'll have no chance of doing anything to it ever again unless you start from scratch. If you keep everything tidy, then you can kind of do small alterations, play with things here and there to get everything how you want it to. Plus it just looks nicer inside your cabinet, not that anybody's actually going to look in there apart from you, to be honest. But yeah, it is just a case of doing this now all the way around there, all the buttons that you're going to be using. Same thing with all the control panel, so that will now go into that one, it will now go into that one, all the way around, daisy chained all the way around, and then onto any other buttons that you've got located elsewhere around your arcade cabinet. And that is it. That is all you need to do. That is the setup of this board. And by the end of it you will have wires going everywhere, and hopefully if you've kept your housekeeping good and you've crimped them together or you've kept it in the logical order, they should look kind of as tidy as possible. This will be chocker, you should have player 1 and player 2 depending on whatever setup you've got going on, and then it's just a case of using this wire to connect it to your either Raspberry Pi or PC. It's all down to you. It all depends on what kind of configuration you have got. Now, that is it guys. That is mission complete. We now have a control interface set up to, well, work on anything, whether it be Pis, whether it be PC, any kind of front ends, emulators, games, all that good stuff. So now you should all be tickety-boo in terms of controls. So, thank you for joining me today guys. In the future I will be covering actually putting the gubbins inside the arcade cabinet. Yes, this means that you will be getting the Raspberry Pi image, and it also means that we're going to be setting up some PCs inside. I'm excited to be honest, because I've been getting bits from everywhere for different standards of PCs. So we'll be covering what kind of PC you need inside your actual cabinet to be able to run this to its full potential. So again, thank you for joining me guys. Please subscribe, please do all the things that people normally do for all this YouTube palaver, malarkey, whatever you call it. But most of all guys, most of all, you have a good day. Laters!